Hello everyone, welcome back to another card combo show, and it has been a while. As you can probably tell from my backdrop, there are changes in motion, so that is why, right when Opus 22 dropped anyway. But regardless, let's get on to the matter at hand, shall we? Ghido. Definitely not the card that first springs to mind when you think of Opus 22, given that we have the limit break cards in this set now and they are making waves. One in particular which I will probably be covering next week. Anyway, Ghido, a 2 CP Earth forward with 10,000 power. And the text, Ghido cannot attack or block. At the end of each of your turns, place one knowledge counter on Ghido. If a character you control has been put from the field into the break zone this turn, place 3 knowledge counters on Ghido instead, and then you can remove 3 of those counters to draw 2 cards. You can use that last effect as many times as you want. If you have 6 counters on him, you can draw 4 cards, and yeah, basically you can use it as frequently as you want. And what's also good about Ghido's effect at the end of the turn is that it's at the end of the turn, which means that it cannot be interrupted in any way. If you can get to your end phase and your opponent hasn't killed Ghido, then he will trigger and they can't like AMI it or anything like that. It will actually happen. So yeah, but ultimately you have to have something die to, you know, get those 3 counters. But that does mean that on your opponent's turn you can draw those cards as well, so you can quite literally go into the following turn drawing 2 cards, which is really, really strong. So things that he obviously pairs well with. There we go. Golbez. So yeah, Golbez is, I mentioned this in a video not so long back with Galoof. And Golbez is a card I really want to make some decks with, but ultimately Golbez can be put from field into the break zone. You can then search Ghido and 3 other forwards of different elements and play them onto the field. Obviously their entry effects don't trigger, but that doesn't really matter for Ghido because you've had something leave the field, and all Ghido cares about is getting to the end of the turn. He then checks, has something been put from field into the break zone? If yes, give 3 counters. So ultimately Golbez can search the Ghido and then get you those counters, not to mention you also have the other forwards as well on the field. Kefka, so dull, choose one forward you control, against 5,000 power until the end of the turn, at the end of the turn, break it, so Opus 1 Kefka. You know, plus 5,000 power is significant, but a 4 CP backup that only does that is not great. However, Kefka is a way to reliably kill one of your own forwards on your turn, if you wanted. And what you can do is Kefka buffs a forward, go to your end step, and both Kefka and Ghido's effects will trigger, and you can stack them how you want. So you would stack it so it goes Ghido first and then Kefka, at which point Kefka will resolve, the forward will break, and then Ghido will resolve. He'll check to see if any characters are broken this turn. They will have because of Kefka. You then get the forward. Now obviously this works quite nicely with Calbrainer, which is something that hasn't been used in a very, very long time, and for good reason. But you can pay 2 Earth to make Calbrainer a forward of 7,000 power, and then when Calbrainer is put from the field in the break zone, return Calbrainer to the field dull. You can only use ability once per turn. So you are able to buff her with Kefka's effect, maybe attack with her, I don't know, whatever. And then at the end of the turn, Calbrainer breaks, but then gets put back onto the field, and that will still trigger Ghido to get a 3 counters rather than 2. Obviously having to dull Kefka, and you have to pay the 2 for Calbrainer, so you're paying 3 CP for a 12k forward, I guess, that ultimately will come back onto the field. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but yeah, just a funny way to be able to utilize Ghido, and a combo that hasn't been used in a very long time. Naja Salahim. So, when Naja Salahim deals damage to your opponent, choose one character, select one counter placed on it, double all counters of the same type as the selected counter on that character. So let's say you get to your turn and Ghido has 3 counters on him. You can attack Naja Salahim. If you deal damage to your opponent, those 3 become 6. Obviously, if you have Chalinka in there, Naja can attack twice, so those 3 become 6, become 12. And as I mentioned earlier, Ghido's effect can be used as many times as you want. So if you have 12 counters, you can draw 8 cards. And obviously this is, you know, stackable. So Naja attacks when he's got 12, goes to 24, goes to 48. I mean, that's ridiculous, but it's technically possible. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, getting Ghido to even 12, which, as I mentioned with Narja Salahim, that's only 2 attacks, provided Ghido has 3. That's not bad in the slightest, because now you have 8 cards to be able to get whatever you want. And obviously Narja Salahim is a 2 CP forward that isn't Earth, so can also be played off of the Golbez as well, which is quite funny. So yeah, you get Ghido onto the field, Narja Salahim onto the field, they survive and can attack, and you play Chelinka. Ghido's probably going to be getting you some cards. Kimari, so yeah, when he enters the field, choose one forward you control, place 1 Ronzo count on it, and that will gain. If this forward is dealt damage by opponent summons or abilities, the damage comes 0 instead. So just a nice way to be able to protect Ghido. Obviously, Ghido is a 10k forward, so, you know, things that deal damage are less of a concern. It's going to be more outright breaks, so things like Ixion or just Odin's, things like that, which can just outright break Ghido because, you know, it's not hard to kill him ultimately, but still making it so that he's a little bit harder to kill with just playing a backup isn't the worst thing in the world. Fenrir. So if Fenrir chooses a forward of cost 2 or less, the cost required to cast Fenrir is reduced by 1. So Fenrir is a free cast. Choose one forward again. This forward cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons at the end of the turn. So if you want Ghido to try and survive, and again on your opponent's turn, on your turn, you go to pass turn for Ghido to gain 3 counters. They're like, no, wait, before you go to your end turn, I'm going to kill him with a summon. You then free cast Fenrir. He doesn't die. Hopefully still get to pass your turn and then gain the 3 counters. And even if your opponent tries to kill him in their turn, you will still get to get those 2 cards. And then you also got this Fenrir as well. So ultimately this is just for choose one Earth forward of cost 2 in your break zone, play it onto the field dull. So if he does die, you have a means of bringing him back onto the field as well. And Fenrir is like the only real good way to be able to get Ghido back onto the field in Earth. Yeah. Galoof, well, I say that. Damage 3. When Galoof is put from the field to the break zone, you may search for one Earth forward across 2 or less and play it onto the field, which is perfect for Ghido because Ghido will check to see if something died. Galoof died. And you will get to then give Ghido 3 counters. How very thematic because they are both 5 characters as well. Soul. So this is more focusing on, again, the summon protection, so similar to the Fenrir. And I guess you could also use the likes of his name, General Leo. So at the beginning of your at the beginning of each attack phase during each player's turn, select one of the 3 following actions for 5 points of damage, blah 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 blah. Basically make it so that your opponent cannot cast summons after the attack phase. And if you know, say you break Golbez and bring Ghido onto the field in your attack phase, then and you've already had Soul use as effect to not be able to cast summons, chances are your opponent's not going to be able to kill Ghido at the end of the turn unless they have an ability ready to go, which, you know, they could do, but still. Regardless, you could theoretically have Golbez on the field with a magic pot. You go to attack phase, make it so your opponent can't cast summons. They accept that. You then magic pot your Golbez to bring out Ghido and then another Golbez as well. And then, yeah, they can't kill Ghido, which is quite nice. I forgot to remove the Pinello, but regardless, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel because it does make a big difference. And even though there are occasionally these breaks in the recordings of the episodes, I'm still here, still doing this, still very much enjoying doing it as well. So yeah, let's make sure to keep on pumping up those numbers and try and get to the holy 1000. Right, Go-Go. Obviously, with Ghido is fantastic because it's an action ability. All you do is remove the counters from Ghido to draw 2 cards. Go-Go sees that, Go-Go copies it, and you draw 2 more cards. So 4 cards for a few counters off of Ghido is really, really good. Cloud. So obviously, Cloud puts something into the break zone. You then get to play another forward onto the field, but then Ghido will also see it at the end of the turn, and you get to play something. So yeah, obviously quite nice. Mog. So at the end of each of your turns, choose up to 1 forward other than Mog. During this turn, if you've drawn 4 more cards, return it to its owner's hand. If you've drawn 6 or more cards, put it into the break zone instead. So obviously using Ghido's effect, you can draw 2 cards. So that's, oh yeah, just for clarity's sake, Mog does include the cards you draw at the beginning of your turn. So technically, it's always going to be 2 less on Mog's thing because you can't not draw 2 cards. But yeah, if you draw 4 more cards, so 2 additional cards from Ghido's effect, then you can return that forward to your opponent's hands. And if you can draw 6 cards, then yeah, so Ghido and maybe something else to draw 2 more cards or some other element. But ultimately, you can just, yeah, put something into the break zone at the end of the turn. Kolka. So play Kolka onto the field, discard Ghido, deal something to 10,000 damage. Pretty simple, but quite effective. Galoof. So yeah, as I mentioned with Golbez earlier, obviously he will be playing lots of 2 costs onto the field, and bringing out Ghido onto the field is quite nice. Making Ghido at 12k is also pretty effective. So yeah, Galoof and Golbez work quite nicely together because of the fact that they both utilize 2 costs and like a deck filled with 2 costs as well. So yep, and again, ultimately they are 5 characters as well, so there's a nice kind of little synergy there. But I mean, Ghido doesn't really need the power buff, to be fair, but still being able to play him onto the field for free with Galoof is quite nice as well. Minwu FFBE. Now this is a bit of a weird one, so we'll finally get into some of the new cards as well. So pay 0, choose 1 card in your break zone during this turn. You can cast it anytime you could normally cast it, as long as you have no cards in hand. You can only use this ability during your turn and only once per turn. And then obviously you can use her Dull and Discard to get into your hand. The reason I'm linking her with Ghido is because she's a really good way to be able to, you know, empty your hand using her effect maybe, and deal 10k to all the forward opponent controls. Their board's gone, you've got a Minwu and a Ghido. You can then pay 0 to choose something in your break zone and be able to cast it anytime you'd normally be able to cast it. You can then use Ghido's effect to put some counters into the break zone to then draw 2 cards. So you've managed to use Minwu's effect with well, technically you can use her pay 0 effect at any point. You can only cast the card when you have no cards in hand, but you are able to get that card, cast it, and then put more cards into your hand as well using Ghido's effect. So yeah, just as a reminder or refresher, sorry, for Minwu's effect, choose one card in your break zone. During this turn you can cast it anytime you can normally cast, as long as you have no cards in hand. So ultimately you will have to use backups to be able to cast this card, but still it means that you can technically use the pay 0 when you have cards in hand. You then discard through her effect, you then play the card or cast the card using your backups, and then use Ghido's effect to get cards to hand, which if you're playing things onto the field like, I don't know, Black Waltzes or Black Mages, which want you to be able to discard cards, then maybe Ghido draws those cards as well to be able to then use for those effects. So who knows, but ultimately you can make sure that you finish the turn with cards in hand while still using Minwu's pay 0 effect. School, a similar sort of thing here as well. So obviously if either player has 2 cards or less in the hand, School gains haste, and if both you and your opponent have no cards in hand, he gains a lot of things and deals a lot of damage and can attack twice. So yeah, you can make so you've got no cards in hand, you then attack with Squall, Squall again, go to pass your turn, give yourself 2 cards off of Ghido. Yeah. Again, you can also use Ghido on your opponent's turn as well, so it might be a case that you finish a turn still with no cards in hand, and you wait until it's your opponent's turn to then draw those cards, because there might be some benefit in that. But ultimately, cards that make you have to go to 0 don't matter as much when you can just all of a sudden draw 2 cards as well. Barsh, here's a card that never got played and will never get played. So at the beginning of your attack phase during each of your turns, if you have 2 more cards in your hand, Barsh gains Brave until the end of the turn. If you have 4 more cards, he also gains plus 2,000 power, and then when he attacks, choose one for the opponent controls. If you have 7 more cards in hand, deal damage equals to Barsh's power. So at best, you get to attack with a 10k Brave and deal 10k to a forward if you have 7 cards in hand. 7 is a pretty significant number. You'd have to have finished the last turn with 3 cards, or got through your opponent's turn with 3 cards, drawn up to 5, then drawn 2 off of Ghido. So it's not the hardest thing in the world, but bearing in mind that generally cards that you take into your opponent's turn are summons and things that you want to be able to use on their turn to, you know, disable any effects they might be having, so who knows. But, you know, if you're able to use it, you're able to use it, which is quite nice. If you want to throw in Shalinka as well to make it so that Barsh can attack twice, deal 10k to 2 different things, who knows, maybe there's something there. Zidane, if you have 6 or more cards in your hand, Zidane cannot be blocked. And obviously when Zidane deals damage to your opponent, draw 2 cards. So you get to draw 2 off of Ghido, put yourself to 6, attack with Zidane, draw 2 more as well. And then that would be quite a nice attempt to be able to use the Mog 6 that I mentioned earlier, because you've drawn 2 off of Ghido, you've drawn 2 off of Zidane, and you've drawn 2 for the turn. Means when you pass turn, you then get to choose a forward opponent controls, put it into the break zone. Yeah, not too shabby. And then finally Arden, because this could be quite funny. So when Arden enters the field, discard your hand. When you do so, your opponent selects one more. We know what Arden does, but ultimately you can go into your turn, let's say with 5 cards, And then, you know, generally you always want to play Arden mid to late game when your opponent's got an established field, because the bad thing about Arden is the fact that your opponent can select the character option as many times as they want, even though they might have enough characters. So they could have only, you know, 4 characters on the field, but they can select that option 5 times, which means that, yeah, they lose all the characters, but they don't have to take points of damage, and they don't have to mill themselves. So ultimately, you can go into your turn with enough cards, play Arden to the field, draw cards off of Ghido, maybe 2, maybe 4, maybe 12, I don't know, and then use those to utilize Arden's discard effect, which means that even if your opponent is saying, I'm going to break my characters, you can effectively, through Ghido, make sure that there's 2 extra characters that are being broken. And when you look at it in that light, Arden basically paying 2 CP to break a character on your opponent's field is not that bad, given the fact that he gets to stay there and you get to keep your field as well. And it can be monsters, it can be forwards, backups, or whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as it's on the field, it can be broken through Arden's effects. Well, I say that. Yeah, it's put it into the break zone as well, so it doesn't even matter if it can't be broken. It gets put into the break zone. That's pretty effective. So, yeah, put yourself to a lot of cards in hand, then play Arden onto the field, and just annihilate your opponent's field. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen, for my first episode of Apis 22. Because, yeah, last one was Pinello, wasn't it? Yeah. Obviously, as you can, again, tell through probably the episode and my setting, a little bit rusty at the moment, but we'll get there. Just need to keep doing things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. It really means a lot to me that, you know, you guys are still watching this stuff, no matter what happens in my life, and the fact that there might be some latency in the videos happening. So I really do appreciate it. It makes a big difference to me. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.